Dude, we're finally gonna get to play Caverna tomorrow! Okay, I know you're excited, but do you really want to scare our friends off? Because I think we should do something a little bit lighter. You mean a gateway game? Or how about an entry-level tabletop experience? I've heard it both ways. Well, regardless, maybe we could play Splendor, or... Oh! How about Pokemon Master Trainer? You gotta stop bringing that up, dude. Well, you know I own Camelot, right? Or, I don't know, what do you suggest then? I say Sagrada. We gotta teach strategy, right? And I mean, you know how good Sagrada is. Better than Camelot? Or maybe even Azul? Well, that's debatable. So, can we just say Sagrada, or what then? What's your suggestion? Pokemon? Don't. Okay, fine. You win. You win. Well, maybe he's right. Would love to dive into the deep end with something like Caverna or Barrage, but I do have to remember even I had to ease into the heavy stuff myself. So, today, let's talk Sagrada, a dice drafting placement game where players take on the roles of stained glass window crafters trying to make the most beautiful stained glass... Are we sure we just can't play Catan? No. Right away, this game doesn't seem like much. Just some cards and an empty stained glass window. I mean, the dice are pretty, but am I really going to enjoy this? That's what most people must be thinking when they sit down to play this for the first time. It's colorful and nice to look at, but how fun can this really be? Board games can take on a lot of interesting themes, and Sagrada's sets the stage pretty well, actually. If you can sit down to play this, then you have to appreciate the delicacy that comes with it. Placing dice so methodically, making sure your window looks elegant, can sound really boring, but it's a quiet and mild approach. It doesn't really get in your face with anything over the top. The game itself is pretty simple. First, you set up public objectives and the tool cards. Then, every player gets a secret objective corresponding to one of the 5 colors of dice in the game. At the end of the game, you total the face value of that color on your window and get that many points. But before that, the biggest decision you have to make is choosing between one of 4 possible windows you could play on, ranging in difficulty from 3 pips being the easiest and 6 pips being the hardest. The windows will dictate everything you can do for the rest of the game, and the pips correspond to how many tokens you'll get. The tokens are used on the tool cards, which are just special abilities that help you with placing and drafting dice. But with all that being said, the placement and drafting decisions you make are everything, so let's just get into it. On your turn, you grab 2 dice per player plus 1 out of the bag and roll them all. Then you start by taking 1 die and placing it in your window. The very first die you draft has to go on the border of your window, and subsequent dice can go right next to the existing dice or diagonally next to them. However, there are specific placement rules for orthogonally adjacent dice. You can't place dice of the same color next to each other, and you also can't place dice with the same number next to each other. You can place whatever diagonally to pre-existing dice, just as long as you don't break the orthogonal rules. And if this wasn't evident just by looking at it, the colored spaces and specific numbered spaces on your window have to be occupied by those respective dice. If you do mess up any placements, you have to remove the dice in order to fix it, and you don't replace them. The game is played over 10 rounds, and you'll draft just enough dice to completely fill up your window, so making placement mistakes can really hurt, and it will affect your score. The heart and soul of this game is the drafting and placing of dice. It's actually a really tense feeling to wait for the next pool of dice to come out and see just how stuck you'll get, especially in the later rounds. The tool cards can help in this regard. If a tool card is empty, you only have to use 1 token, and if there's any number of tokens in the card, then you have to use 2. And the variability here is nice, because you'll only ever see 3 cards each time you play. That circles back to the decision you have to make at the start of the game when you pick a window. Do you pick the easier layout, or do you opt for more tokens? I do like that you have to balance those decisions depending on the available tool cards, the public objectives in play, and your private objective. It's also great that the drafting of the dice goes clockwise and then counterclockwise. This is called a snake draft, where the starting player drafts and then the last player in turn order goes back to back, snaking back to the starting player. In a 2-player game, this isn't that big of a deal, but in a 3 and definitely in a 4-player game, this process greatly affects the options you have to work with. Another big driving force of the game are the public objectives, and they'll direct how you situate dice in your window. To maximize your points, you'll primarily focus on those, while also prioritizing higher values on the dice matching your private color. Once the scoring happens, all players will more or less break even on the public goals, so that's why you have to leverage your score with your private goal and your leftover tokens. After 10 rounds, each player will score their private color and deduct 1 point from their score for each empty space on their window. Each leftover tool token is worth 1 point each, and then you score all of the public objectives, and the player with the most points is the winner. It's a straightforward game that's tied together with its unique theme and those delightful dice. There's enough variability with the objectives and the tool cards to make each game feel a little bit different. And in addition, you get different window opportunities, and the dice are always a roll of luck to keep you on your toes. I find Sagrada to be a great gateway strategy game with plenty of depth for any player's skill level. What he isn't telling you is that it can get predictable, especially after playing it enough times. The endgame scoring is really dry because all players are working towards the same goals. They'll just go about it in different ways depending on the dice that are being drafted. The tool cards can help you secure some higher numbered dice in your color, but those will only get you so far because you'll only have so many tokens, and the number of tokens you'll have is dependent on the windows you're dealt matched with your private color, and that's contingent on the tools that are even in play. But what he isn't telling you is that even though the scoring is kind of anticlimactic, the game itself works really well as a whole. And with that, I'll have to concede. The feedback loop of rolling dice, considering your options, drafting, and placing is just really satisfying. Each die you take will impact the rest of the game, and it ramps up at the right pace. As the game goes on, your window becomes increasingly more crowded and you only have so many choices. That tension is perfect. And while there isn't that much player interaction, the good side to that is that it's not very cutthroat. And that's because, generally speaking, you make moves that best suit your needs before making a more defensive move. And that caters to people looking for a not so in-your-face kind of game. So, as an entry-level tabletop experience, I find Sagrada to be one of the best out there. I haven't looked into any of the expansions, but the base game itself is really good on its own. My advice, if you're looking past classics like Catan or Ticket to Ride, you can't go wrong with Sagrada.